Blackstone Audio presents The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, A History of Nazi Germany, by William L. Shirer. I have often felt a bitter sorrow at the thought of the German people, which is so estimable in the individual and so wretched in the generality. Goethe. Hitler was the fate of Germany, and this fate could not be stayed. Field Marshal Walter von Brauchitsch, Commander-in-Chief of the German Army, 1938 to 1941. 1,000 years will pass, and the guilt of Germany will not be erased. Hans Frank, Governor-General of Poland, before he was hanged at Nuremberg. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to relive it. Santayana. Book 1. The Rise of Adolf Hitler. Chapter 1. Birth of the Third Reich. On the very eve of the birth of the Third Reich, a feverish tension gripped Berlin. The Weimar Republic, it seemed obvious to almost everyone, was about to expire. For more than a year it had been fast crumbling. General Kurt von Schleicher, who, like his immediate predecessor, Franz von Papen, cared little for the Republic and less for its democracy, and who, also like him, had ruled as Chancellor by presidential decree without recourse to Parliament, had come to the end of his rope after 57 days in office. On Saturday, January 28, 1933, he had been abruptly dismissed by the aging President of the Republic, Field Marshal von Hindenburg. Adolf Hitler, leader of the National Socialists, the largest political party in Germany, was demanding for himself the chancellorship of the Democratic Republic he had sworn to destroy. The wildest rumors of what might happen were rife in the capital that fateful winter weekend, and the most alarming of them, as it happened, were not without some foundation. There were reports that Schleicher, in collusion with General Kurt von Hammerstein, the commander-in-chief of the army, was preparing a putsch with the support of the Potsdam garrison for the purpose of arresting the president and establishing a military dictatorship. There was talk of a Nazi putsch. The Berlin stormtroopers, aided by Nazi sympathizers in the police, were to seize the Wilhelmstrasse, where the president's palace and most of the government ministries were located. There was talk also of a general strike. On Sunday, January 29th, 100,000 workers crowded into the Lustgarten in the center of Berlin to demonstrate their opposition to making Hitler chancellor. One of their leaders attempted to get in touch with General von Hammerstein to propose joint action by the army and organized labor, should Hitler be named to head a new government. Once before, at the time of the Kapp putsch in 1920, a general strike had saved the Republic after the government had fled the capital. Throughout most of the night from Sunday to Monday, Hitler paced up and down in his room in the Kaiserhof Hotel on the Reichskanzlerplatz, just down the street from the Chancellery. Despite his nervousness, he was supremely confident that his hour had struck. For nearly a month he had been secretly negotiating with Papen and the other leaders of the conservative right. He had had to compromise. He could not have a purely Nazi government. But he could be chancellor of a coalition government whose members, 8 out of 11 of whom were not Nazis, agreed with him on the abolition of the democratic Weimar regime. Only the aged, dour president had seemed to stand in his way. As recently as January 26th, 2 days before the advent of this crucial weekend, the grisly old field marshal had told General von Hammerstein that he had no intention whatsoever of making that Austrian corporal either Minister of Defense or Chancellor of the Reich. Yet under the influence of his son, Major Oskar von Hindenburg, of Otto von Meissner, the State Secretary to the President, of Papen and other members of the Palace Camarilla, the President was finally weakening. He was 86 and fading into senility. On the afternoon of Sunday, January 29th, while Hitler was having coffee and cakes with Goebbels and other aides, Hermann Göring, president of the Reichstag and second to Hitler in the Nazi Party, burst in and informed them categorically that on the morrow Hitler would be named chancellor. Shortly before noon on Monday, January 30th, 1933, Hitler drove over to the Chancellery for an interview with Hindenburg that was to prove fateful for himself, for Germany, and for the rest of the world. From a window in the Kaiserhof, Goebbels' room and other Nazi chiefs kept an anxious watch on the door of the Chancellery, where the Führer would shortly be coming out. We would see from his face whether he had succeeded or not, Goebbels noted. For even then they were not quite sure. Our hearts are torn back and forth between doubt, hope, joy, and discouragement, Goebbels jotted down in his diary. We have been disappointed too often for us to believe wholeheartedly in the great miracle. A few moments later, they witnessed the miracle. The man with the Charlie Chaplin mustache, who had been a down-and-out tramp in Vienna in his youth, an unknown soldier of World War I, a derelict in Munich in the first grim post-war days, the somewhat comical leader of the beer hall putsch, this spellbinder who was not even German but Austrian, and who was only 43 years old, had just been administered the oath as Chancellor of the German Reich. He drove the 100 yards to the Kaiserhof and was soon with his old cronies, Goebbels, Goering, Röhm, and the other brown shirts who had helped him along the rocky, brawling path to power. He says nothing, and all of us say nothing, Goebbels recorded, but his eyes are full of tears. That evening, from dusk until far past midnight, the delirious Nazi stormtroopers marched in a massive torchlight parade to celebrate the victory. By the tens of thousands, they emerged in disciplined columns from the depths of the Tiergarten, passed under the triumphal arch of the Brandenburg Gate and down the Wilhelmstrasse, their bands blaring the old martial airs to the thunderous beating of the drums, their voices bawling the new Horst Wessel song and other tunes that were as old as Germany, their jackboots beating a mighty rhythm on the pavement, their torches held high and forming a ribbon of flame that illuminated the night and kindled the hurrahs of the onlookers massed on the sidewalks. From a window in the palace, Hindenburg looked down upon the marching throng, beating time to the military marches with his cane, apparently pleased that at last he had picked a chancellor who could arouse the people in a traditionally German way. Whether the old man in his dotage had any inkling of what he had unleashed that day is doubtful. A story, probably apocryphal, soon spread over Berlin that in the midst of the parade he had turned to an old general and said, "I didn't know we had taken so many Russian prisoners."